Okay, 7:10, and then we have quorum, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. All right, so the first order of business is the acknowledgement of traditional lands. And what are we doing tonight?
The land upon which we work, live, and sustain ourselves is the ancestral and treaty lands of the Michizagig Anishinaabe, also known today as the Mississaugas of the Credit, the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land. We also recognize the rich pre-contact history and relationships, which include the Anishinaabe and the Ongwe Hongwe.
Since European contact, this land continues to be home to Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. As responsible community members, we value the diversity, dignity, and worth of all people.
Colonialism displaced and dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their ancestral land
and continues to deny their basic human rights, dignities, and freedoms.
We are committed to learning true history to reconcile, make reparations, and fulfill our treaty obligations to the original peoples and our collective responsibilities to the land, water, animals, and each other for future generations.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, so we are going to now approve the agenda. We don't have any changes, right? Not last minute changes? Okay. So who would like to move for approval? Thank you, Barb. Secondary, Mary?
Yes, but I just wanted to ask a question. Regarding
the agenda?
No, you mean the agenda for tonight?
Yes.
Sorry, no.
Okay. Okay. All in approval? There. Okay. Number 4 is the declaration of conflict of interest. We have a thin crowd tonight, so I'm guessing we don't have any conflicts. And seeing no hands up, we're going to move on to the approval of the minutes of the SEAC meeting of September 26, 2023. Does anybody have any comments, questions, or concerns with regard to these minutes? Mary?
Yes. So, in terms of the,
You want to?
all right. My apologies. Through you, Madam Chair. Number 10, the multidisciplinary support model. Towards the end, like at the very bottom, there it says Peel District School Board tracks graduation rates, which are brought to the board meetings annually and may be brought to SEAC upon request. A number of students do not graduate lack of community hours. Some graduation data may not be shared due to low self-count, and continues on. It says that my query and request for data is taken under advisement. So I'm not really sure what that means. What I think I was trying to ask for was some data to be brought back to the board. I'm not sure what advisement means, so we can get some clarification. And do I need to make a motion or something to have data brought back to the board?
So through you, Chair, thanks for the question. Yeah, when we take that under advisement, we basically sharing that we can, when formally requested, bring data back to the table. So that's something that you can raise formally.
Okay, later on.
Okay. Probably in our question period.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
With that said, you want to move for approval of the agenda as it stands?
Yes.
Okay. And
Sorry,
oh, sorry.
just on that comment, if I may respond to Mary's
Yeah, go ahead.
inquiry. Yeah, so I just, if I could refer potentially to a report that was brought forward to the Board of Trustees on January 24th, 2023. And that was a report on graduation rates and non-graduates in the event that people wanted to look at that in more detail. There was a board report that was brought forward last January. And subsequently, another board report will be coming in the new year as it's an annual report.
So do we have access to that report?
100%, it's public. It's a
And where
public
would you-
report.
Yeah, like where would we find that? Has it been actually shared with SEAC or is it just out there?
It's not shared with SEAC, it's shared with the entire board publicly, but Sabrina can give you the details around where to find it on the SharePoint or internet site, but it's
Will that-
public.
Will that include BOC 1?
Sorry?
Will that include BOC 1?
I'd have to go back, Mary, to see whether or not we delineate or disaggregate the data down to block one, but certainly there's a report there. And then perhaps what we could do is, once you detail and review the report, if there's further questioning or queries around detail, then perhaps we could narrow that inquiry.
Oh, because that was specifically my inquiry was about one. Okay, thank you.
So I'm gonna move up and pick on Jesse to second the approval of the agenda. Okay. All in favor? Good, wonderful. Okay. So then. We have somebody looking for the, where to find that, information. Delegations. We have a question from Jamie Peddle, resident regarding autism supports in schools. And I didn't receive a written question in my email, so
It's a delegation.
it's a delegation. Oh, it's a
Yes, 10
delegation.
minutes.
Okay, okay. Usually I get informed ahead of time.
It's attached.
I mean, I get an email, some of the attendees specifically sent. That's okay, okay, go ahead.
We just push the button here and just hang on
Yep,
to it?
yep, push the button, introduce yourself, and you have 10 minutes.
Okay, great, thank you. My name is Jamie Peddle, and first of all, it's not a question I have. It's basically concerns actually that I have regarding the status quo approach that you guys take here in the Peel District School Board when it comes to not just children with autism, but children with disabilities all around. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I've lived here in Brampton for 41 years, right in Brampton. Is there something wrong?
No.
Oh, okay.
Just the same.
All right. Growing up here as a child here in Bremley, you don't realize about the special education when you see children until you actually live it. You don't know what families go through. You don't see it unless you actually live it. And growing up here as a child, the school systems were totally different compared to they are now. And when my son was diagnosed with autism, he was brought to Jefferson Public School from kindergarten to grade 2. Jacob wasn't allowed to go to school for the very first 2 weeks because he's autistic. And I was told by the principal that the reason why he wasn't allowed to go to school was, she said that we had to get the school straightened away and organized first. That's totally unacceptable, considering, where we live in a great country like Canada, and to discriminate my son because he's autistic is very troubling. Last year, my son was lost from school. He ran 1.6 kilometers in 22 minutes. And thank God, the quick response of the EAs and the quick response of the police to find my son, he was able to come back to me alive and safe, which is very troubling as well. You can go to any school here in Peel region from grade 6 to grade up, and you guys don't even have not one fenced in area. Not one fenced in area. You have children that are flight risk with all kinds of disabilities, and they don't even have nowhere to play. That's unacceptable, very unacceptable. Considering the average life expectancy of a child with autism is 36 years old, and that's due to accidents and so forth, which is a clear understanding. So we have over 6,000 kids in special needs. Can someone give me an exact number of how many kids are in special education? I'd like to have an exact number.
Those are usually in the October reports.
Well, you don't have the exact number? I'd like to know what's the exact number of special education. How many kids is in the special education system? That's the question I have first. Can anybody give me that answer? Oh,
Through you, Madam Chair. I don't believe we have an exact number. It actually changes every day. So for example, yesterday I had 4 emails pass through my desk and I monitor north of the 401 and there were 4 new enrollments in the school in any given day. So it fluctuates students moving. But around 6,000 for students with special needs and autism. A good approximate.
okay. So we don't have an exact number. So we got over 6,000. Okay. How many OTs do you guys have in special education that works with over 6,000 kids? Can anybody have an answer for that? Got to hit this button when someone's done talking, or
No, she's.
no? Oh, okay. I'm sorry, through you, Chair.
So when you're delegating, when you're presenting,
Okay,
you ask the questions.
okay,
And then what we'll come up with, we'll take them under advisement and then we'll answer them.
well,
Yeah,
This-
so you're delegating, you're presenting your case. So do you have numbers? So can you?
well, no, I don't have the numbers
Okay.
because I'm not in that chair. If I was in that chair, I would know the numbers. So we have over 6,000 kids, right? Okay, so we're in agreement. You don't have the exact number, so I would like to know is how many occupational therapists do we have that work with over 6,000 children? How many speech do we have that works with over 6,000? I know we have only 6 BCBAs. That's all you guys got, only 6. That's totally unjustified. I don't know how you can have only 6 BCBAs working with over 6,000 children. So board certified behavior analysis, let me just give you, what their expertise are. They work with children with autism, Asperger's, Down syndrome. And, they use a certain type of learning strategy, applied behavior analysis, and it works with children to basically have them progress, to learn different goals, techniques, strategies, and stuff like that. Stuff that teachers and EAs are not qualified to do, right? So, when I hear that we have over 6,000 children and we only have 6 board certified behaviors, I was told you only have 3 OTs. That's what I was told. And the speech is very low as well. So I'm here today to basically express my unsatisfactory about on how the school board is run here when it comes to special education and how children with special needs are treated like basically 3rd-class citizens. So what I would like to see here moving forward is that, number 1, we allow BCBAs in the schools. They do it in Toronto, but we don't do it here in Peel District School Board. Okay, so the government of Ontario, they've given all these family members money, okay, for the OAP. Now, what a perfect opportunity for we as a society to say, hey, you have a BCBA, come on into the school, work with the children. The parents are paying for it. Why don't you guys do that here? So that's number 1. That's the number 1 delegation. They do it in Toronto, but they don't do it here. Okay. And number 2, okay, we need to basically regulate ABA in our school systems. Okay, for children with special needs, with autism, Down syndrome, Asperger's, and all this stuff. Okay, like there's 72 school boards in Ontario. We're Peel District School Board is number 2 out of all of them. I just don't understand how Toronto does certain things and we don't. So this is what I like to see. I like to see this, as well as more investment in children with special needs. Like, and another thing too is that you have schools right now that have 2 and 3 classes of special needs. Why don't we have now 1 BCBA in a school? You have 2 classrooms. I mean, What a perfect opportunity to have someone in there working with the children because they have all kinds of needs here. You know what I mean? The teachers are not qualified to a certain degree. Same thing with the EAs. Like you just can't become a principal and say, I want to become a principal in school. No, you have certain qualifications. Same thing with a teacher. You know, you guys really gotta start looking at everything here and helping these children because when I hear and see family members having children in high school wearing diapers, that's very troubling. You know why they're wearing diapers? You guys failing them, man. You guys are failing them. The school board is failing these kids. You know, we should be setting them up for success, right? So we have to get rid of the status quo approach and we have to start changing policies here. And yeah, and I just want to say thank you for your time. And this is my concerns. And for anybody that don't know me, I've lobbied all federal and provincial politicians for healthcare for autism treatment. I've done all kinds of advocacy. So yeah, and when I see and hear different things going on in different places, and I see us, it's very troubling. That's it. Thank you.
And you made it 9.5 minutes.
There we go. I signed it right on perfect just for you.
Sorry, ADHD brain.
There you go. So I just shut this off. So I'm good right now. Okay. All right.
So we've heard your concerns and we've had notes taken. And certainly this is something, you know, we've heard you. We've heard you.
I
A
hope
lot
so.
of us are aware. Many of us have sat on this board on this SEAC board for many years, and a lot of us are parents of children with special needs, and we understand about neurodiversity, and we understand about how brains work and the importance of getting the supports to kids when they're young, because that's when you make the most difference. We understand this. So we've heard you and we thank you for your delegation.
Okay, I do have a question for you. If you heard me, then I'm just curious, and why are we here? Like, why am I here now? Because if you heard me,
The
then
Special Education Committee is an advisor committee. It is a set of, it's 12 parent representatives. We come from organizations that, provincial organizations that represent a variety of exceptionalities. And there are also trustees that sit on the Special Education Advisory Committee. And we are presented with ideas and directions from the board, and we make suggestions. That's all we can do. We are an advisory committee. We can only make suggestions as parents, and we advocate continuously for children with, and all children with special needs, because that's what we're here for all the children, and to make this the best board for all children, so that when every child graduates from this board and moves on, they are the best person that they can be. That's all we want. We're parents. That's what we want to. And we realize that if we don't put things in place, if we don't make the education system better, if we're not continuously improving, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren are not going to benefit. So we're aware of this, and we're aware of our responsibility, and we are doing the best that we can in our advisory position.
thank you for that. I just wanted to say one thing, and
I'll allow you half another minute.
have another minute. Okay. Well, thank you. You're very kind. When my son went to Jefferson, and he wasn't allowed to go to school for the very first 2 weeks of school, I told and complained to my school board of trustee, Carrie Andrews. And she did nothing for me. Absolutely nothing. I brought this up. It's truly remarkable how people can be elected and not do anything about it. So thank you for saying you hear me, that you understand what I'm trying to explain. I appreciate that. Saying that, I'll judge everybody here when I actually see and hear there's actual results. I just had a meeting with Mr. Lecce himself and his staff there, and I expressed my concerns about the education system here in the province of Ontario.
Okay,
And,
again, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And we've heard you, okay?
Okay, so one question, when can I expect to hear something of any kind of results being done, or is this gonna be kind of?
Well, I'm going to have a discussion at the end of the meeting about what kind of a response is what we can get, okay? Have you left your contact information? Do we have your?
Yeah, you guys have my contact information, but I just want to make it clear to everybody here right now before I leave this, is that this is not an attack on teachers or EAs, absolutely not. This is basically, I want to make this clear on how the Peel District School Board is run when it comes to special education. Because you can only do so much. I mean, I watched on the news, I saw on the news that you guys laid off 500 people. I don't know, I'm just saying, that's what I heard. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what I heard.
Okay, we're not talking, so if there's information out there about funding and how education is funded, and unfortunately, I don't know about layoffs, but I'm going to say we have our notes. We're gonna have a discussion
Okay,
as to the proper way of responding to your concerns, okay?
okay,
You will hear from us, I promise you,
okay,
okay?
when can I expect to hear?
I can't tell you. I'm sorry, my ADHD, my neurodivergent brain is kind of shutting down right now
Okay,
because I'm
No.
feeling judged and that.
well, I'm not judging you, ma'am, I'm
That
just,
is, that's part of my disability. So
yeah,
I'm going to ask you to accommodate my brain and
sure, no problem.
we're going to,
So are
We're
you the
going
one
to
in
get
charge, or would you be the one in charge, or,
I'm the chair. I'm not the one in charge.
Oh.
I am the chair.
okay, you're,
Okay, I'm
Okay.
in charge of this particular meeting, so I'm
Okay.
saying, we've heard you,
perfect,
do something about it. We're going to move on,
okay,
okay.
but the BCBA's is
We are going to
official.
move on,
Okay, thank you,
we've heard you, we've had your,
thank you,
thank you,
thank you very much.
thank you, Jamie. All right. Do we have to move, we don't move for receipt of that, do we? No, okay. So we are going to move on to the staff reports. And before that, I do have regrets. I did check my email and we have regrets from Jeffrey and Anne, and there was somebody else who responded to legal governments, and I can't remember right
I
now.
was gonna be late, but I wasn't.
You weren't, okay, all right. So
That's what we have.
Jeffrey, yeah, trustee Jeffrey Clark and Ann Smith have said regrets. Sorry? We need to receive it? Okay, we do need to receive, okay. Dorothy, you're gonna receive the delegation?
She wants to know something.
Yes,
I just wanted to mention that Carol Ogilvy with the Learning Disabilities Association of Peel Region has called in her regrets, and I'm her alternate, Leanne Mellon. She
Okay,
asked
but-
me to.
oh, yeah, so, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Leanne. I recognized you when you came in. That's
Thanks.
like,
I just had to move her.
That's okay.
I'm the other.
So would you like to second the receipt of the delegation? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Leanne. All right. Do received, okay. All right, so we're gonna move on to staff reports, the superintendent report, and that's Claudine Spitato. And she's giving us our report, her second one. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you for being here again with us this evening and for your continued partnership and commitment. I want to also acknowledge that Coordinating Principal Earl Jacket is in the room with me today and Associate Director Paul Silva. I wanted to start this evening by sharing, as I promised last time, some feedback about the ISSP Institute. I'm pleased to share that over 3 days, we shared system messaging with every school in the district. Both the principal and lead ISSP teacher or the special education department head were able to join us. The learning goals of the morning sessions were to develop an understanding that special education must be rooted in equity and justice for people with disabilities. We were clarifying educator actions with responsibilities to the school review process and supporting high expectations for people with disabilities and understanding the student review process and IEPs, support to ensure accountability and high expectations for all learners. In the afternoon, we focused with the literacy team on developing and understanding that literacy instruction for all students should be rooted in a structured literacy approach. That Tier 1 intervention includes explicit instruction of the new strand B of the language curriculum. And finally, that all tiers of instruction are responsibility of the classroom teacher, and that ISSP teachers and resource teachers can provide additional support in all tiers. The feedback from the session, you'll be happy to hear, was overwhelmingly positive. One educator shared, "This was a fabulous opportunity to sit alongside of administrators and partner schools to help hear clear messagings about the new changes and expectations for the student review meetings. Thank you for making this session happen today. It was informative, it was clarifying, and it focused on students. I'm excited about the work that will begin to happen following the tiered system to serve all students in our schools." Another member said, "The PD and resources were helpful. It was nice to continue some training on literacy and discuss implementation of these resources, especially for students with disabilities. It was so needed." We also collected feedback about next steps, and at the end of the learning and school teams shared what they would like to continue learning on. And interestingly enough, it did very much mirror the feedback from SEAC in our last meeting around the IEPs, development and monitoring and implementation, the 3 stages of the IEPs, tiered literacy support, family and professional collaboration with outside partners such as yourself, and looking at different models of special education. Our professional development team, which includes 3 new members, is committed to centering the voices of educators and working alongside students with disabilities, as well as centering the voices of SEAC. So we have committed to taking those additional next steps as guided by the feedback we received. Next, I wanted to communicate the hiring that took place to support the system and developing capacity. So additional special education and social emotional staff was approved on the July 5th board meeting, and subsequently included the addition of 100 additional EAs, 5 additional transition educational assistants, 5 additional ASD and special needs educational assistants, 2 additional blind low vision itinerants, the addition of 5 additional social emotional learning resource teachers, the allocation to our virtual schools, elementary and secondary, of 2 educational assistants, 1 each, so students even in the online learning environment would have access to educational assistants. In-school support personnel, which is ISSP teachers, additional 13 FTE, additional 8 special education resource teachers, an additional for elementary, and additional 7 in secondary. CYCPs, child and youth critical practitioners, an additional 26 FTEs were allocated by the board. An additional 26 educational assistants to the intensive support team, who are students, EAs who will help students experiencing high-risk stress behavior, a social emotional learning consultant, 2 additional social workers, and an additional 11 was just recently added educational assistants to this system. So I'd like to share and thank the Director's Office for their continued contributions to ensuring that the needs of our students with disabilities are being met. And finally, I'd like to share a couple of upcoming events that have been organized to assist students in their transition to different post-secondary pathways. Many of you have talked about that as a need, and the Peel District School Board has collaborated with several other boards to establish 2 informative events focused on post-secondary transition. The first event is known as Launch, is scheduled for November 1st, running from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's actually being conducted in partnership with Ottawa Carleton District and Ottawa Catholic Boards. It's a virtual post-secondary pathway exploration conference for students grade 10 to age 21. We're expecting over 30,000 students from boards across Ontario. What makes Launch unique is that it's an inclusive approach, offering options for a wide variety of students of different ability levels. The event will feature accessibility departments from post-secondary institution and representatives from community integration through cooperative ed at Humber College. as well as a program tailored for students with intellectual disabilities will also be available there. In addition, various college workplace programs and transition programs will also be showcased. Representatives from the food and beverage industry, travel and tourism industry of Ontario and Employment Ontario will talk about inclusive hiring practices in the different sectors and support services that are available for individuals with disabilities. We invite students, families, and guardians to register for this event, and I'm committed to sharing that information with all of you. The second event is the Central Resource Fair and is organized in partnership with Transition Advisory Committee and the Dufferin Peel Catholic School Board. This in-person event will give this community an opportunity to learn about supports and services available after high school for students with developmental or intellectual disabilities. This event will feature exhibitors from service providers like community programs, government supports, recreational opportunities, and employment supports. On Wednesday, November 8th from 6:30 to 8:30, this event will take place at St. Marguerite du Vide Secondary School in Brampton and for Peel and Dufferin Peel students and families in the north. And on Wednesday, April 24th from 6:30 to 8:30, a similar event will take place at Applewood Acres Secondary for those in the south. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Does anybody have any comments, questions with regards to that report? Mary?
That was wonderful. Very excited about the launch and the Central Hiring Fair. That's actually really, really good, and that will be very helpful to our students navigating those pathways beyond high school. And you said you're going to share that with us, because I didn't get all the dates there. So
Yes, I have flyers that I can share with you. Sorry, through you, Chair, of course, yeah. I have flyers that I can share with all of you to share with any community partners that you may have. We're really, really welcoming all members of our community.
And then another thing through you, Chair. This, I know you said for current students, so if we have like students that have already left the board, like maybe graduated in June, are those students?
Absolutely, we're happy to share those links with them as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Josie?
Yeah, Mike, first a comment, thank you for sharing all the staff that we got hired for the schools with support. So I was very happy to hear about that. My only question is around, I think you mentioned that we were getting 2 new blind low vision support. Was there thought, maybe I missed it, but was there thought put into orientation and mobility for students?
Through you, Chair, are you looking for a particular service that has been missed?
Well, I'm just thinking about the kids with visual impairment, like low blind vision, and my son, like the blind low vision specialist help in class. But when it comes to navigating the class, like he's in grade 2, and I think about other little kids navigating the school grounds, outside, inside, the stairways. Especially when they're young, it's such a crucial age because they're like walking with a cane, right? And it's unfamiliar grounds and social pressures. And I think that those type of roles are instrumental in kind of helping the child get confident and being independent. I know you mentioned, I think you said blind low vision itinerants, and they're phenomenal. But just wondering if there's been any thought for orientation mobility.
Through you, Chair, that's an excellent question. I can certainly bring that back and even look at the role of the itinerant and see how we can adapt that role to include that service, unless it's a specialized service, and then we'd have to look at that, but I can certainly take that back.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Kevin?
I just wanted to ask on the workshops, is there some sort of plan that continue? I know there's lots of feedback and stuff, but what is the plan to, going forward to make sure all those teachers are trained and to keep the momentum going?
Absolutely, and through you, Chair. Yeah, there is a plan for implementation, and we're looking at a number of strategies that won't necessarily take release time, knowing that there's a huge financial restriction around the ability to release that many teachers across the system. We've partnered with our EML team to provide D2L type learning, and are also offering some after-school learning to educators, and you'll be amazed and thrilled at the fact that when we offer these after-school schools opportunities. The majority of them still come because they really do want to have the best information that would support the system. But for things like IEP training and development and writing, we'll make sure that that is done through the family of schools meeting, which is time that's captured for all principals. And then our team creates slide decks that are then transferred into staff meetings. So not just ISSB teachers would get that training, but every single individual teacher in the classroom through their mandatory staff meetings that happen monthly.
Sorry, quick follow-up, which is when with D2L, they better just put it on the teacher learning portal. I'm assuming that's, you can just put it, well, I mean, I use D2L, so
Yes, so
we can just put it in there.
Yeah, through you, Chair. With D2L, we would offer that for teachers who would like to have the ability to access the learning when they need it, depending on the module and the information. So it stays up there for teachers to be able to access for whenever they need it, but we would reinforce that learning through the supports at the staff meeting.
I'm sorry, this is for representatives.
Oh, okay, I wanted to ask a question.
Nope, I'm sorry, it's
Oh,
for
okay.
representatives.
It's for representatives, okay.
Sorry. Yes, Barb?
Sorry, I may have missed it, but how many teachers participated in the ISSP training?
So we had representation from every school. So we had one ISSP teacher per school, along with one administrator in every school, in all 259 of our schools.
Okay, thank you.
We took attendance, so we know.
Did they stay the whole day?
They sure did. We had really, really great feedback.
So I don't see anybody else looking at me. So Barb, would you like to move her receipt of that?
Sure,
report?
yeah.
Dorothy, would you like to say anything? Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to 7.2, which is accessing support for students demonstrating high-risk behavior. And this is a great report, considering that we've been having some discussions about this around the table. So thank you, Connie.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I wanted to start by acknowledging that when, I first started with SEAC, I had an opportunity to meet with Shelley, and one of the things she said is that she really wants SEAC to have a role in setting guidelines and operating procedures before they're finalized. So you will notice that this is an actual draft of a document that has not yet been finalized, because we are seeking your input and understanding around making sure that when we have draft OPs, which are called operating procedures, because I promised I wouldn't use acronyms, that they really are meeting the needs, the diverse needs of our students. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the operating procedure is threefold. It really intends to aid in identifying high-risk behaviors and accessing significant collaborative supports for students who are demonstrating what I like to call stress behaviors, because we all know that behavior is a form of communication through the multidisciplinary team, which is the team that I shared with you last month. The second point is that
I'm really sorry, but if you're going to have a discussion, do you mind taking it out of the room?
Sorry, no, I was just writing something down.
Thank you. The operating procedure endeavors to support school administrators to balance the needs of individual students with the needs of the school community in alignment with the Ontario Human Rights Code and the Peel Policy 48, which is our Safe and Caring Schools policy. And it really highlights the benefits of using professional collaborative approach to support students with high-risk behaviors, as outlined in the policy procedure memorandum, collaborative professionalism. Slide, please. So what are the key differences between this draft of SESS 17 and the updated draft? So when we looked at rewriting the operating procedures, we wanted to rewrite it. As we know from the ministry review, many of our Black and Indigenous students have a significant impact of increased marginalization through the way that we're interacting with them. So we wanted to make sure that we rewrote it through an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and anti-ableist focusing on those practices. We wanted clear and transparent guidelines with links embedded into the document, so that when principals or schools were having these concerns, that they had a document that was readily accessible, that was very clear. We wanted to focus on inclusionary practice and make sure that even though students are exhibiting stress behavior, that they belong and deserve to be in classrooms. And we aligned it with the SRM process, as you know, which really communicates and centers family voice throughout the process. So what I'm asking you to do, and I printed out copies for those of you who didn't have printed copies, is really, and we don't have to do this right now in the interest of time, unless people have read it and have feedback that I can document right now, that they've taken the time to read it in advance. What you can do is annotate right on here and then email it back to me so that when I'm looking at your feedback, to give people the time, and I know that we all learn at different paces and we need different sort of environments for learning. I'll give you all a printed copy and ask you to say, I like this part concerns me, I need more information about this part, it's not clear. Remembering that it's an operating procedure that's written for principals, right? So a lot of the things that are in there, but want to make sure that you truly believe that this is an operating procedure that fits the best needs of students, both those exhibiting the high risk behavior and those who may be kind of in the classroom when that's happening, right? Because we have to balance the rights of all students. So I don't know if anybody's read it and has some feedback they want to share right now, or you just want to take another look at the OP and bring it back or email it back to me with feedback. What does everybody prefer? Just want to honor your own style of learning and sharing.
Do we have some feedback with regards to how we would prefer to respond? Does anybody have a response at this juncture? No. What would we do about the people that aren't there? Because I know Anne would probably be very interested in.
Yeah, and through you, Chair, it is a part of the package, so they already have the document. I just didn't know if people wanted to do it right now. So I just wanted to provide a printed copy because that eases something for everybody. I'm just going to remind you though that it is a draft and confidential document, so it has been not shared with the system at all, because we are really trying to seek SEAC feedback, so that after you share your feedback that we keep it until it's approved through our own internal policies, which means that we continue to collaborate with our internal stakeholders. We make sure it's aligned to policy and procedure, and then we take it to the director's office for final approval. If you want to move to the next slide, then after we do that, we seek that approval process, and then we start on making sure that we provide that professional learning that would support the implementation, because it's only one thing to write in operating procedures. It's another thing to make sure that schools and administrators have the support that they need for a deep and thorough implementation, so that students are the benefactors of this new process and approach.
So we're at further consultation with stakeholders.
So internal stakeholders, so including union groups, for example. We've already consulted with our own Cecil team before we brought you this draft. Other stakeholders is legal, of course, and we also have consulted with our health and safety department, who is responsible and tasked with the safety of staff in these situations when students are demonstrating their stress behavior. So we have done quite a thorough internal, we will continue to do the internal collaboration. We take feedback, make modifications, and then present to the director's office for approval.
So would there be any external stakeholders who would be looking at this, or would that be post approval?
Right here. Yes, you are our external stakeholders, right?
Consider, okay.
Yeah. So we also, from an external standpoint, I do attend what's called RSEC, which is a Regional Superintendents of Education's Council, where we talk best practice and we share best practice across the board. So it's not just, the Peel board who's doing something, but we think, okay, what's best practice for you? What have you had success with? So we've already done that process as well last week.
Hi, Dorothy.
Is there any way of seeing the document prior to the final approval? Because what we may see now could be very different at the end.
So through you, yes, I'm hoping that I don't want to delay the sending it out to the system. But what we can do is I can bring it back as an agenda item at the next one and show you kind of where we've landed with your feedback. So I would ask that your feedback be timely, like within the next week if I can, because we are having a number of students who would benefit from this revamp of operating procedure, and we want to start to implementation. So that's a great question. And yes, of course, we would bring that back, but I don't want to delay the approval process. But I'm hoping you see the reflection of knowing that when you're providing feedback too, I might come back to you and share with you why that's not a possibility. There are many internal kind of guidelines and expectations that we must follow, both through special education in Ontario and some internal policies that we have to follow as well. Thank you very much.
All right, so shall we just pass?
Yes.
Pass on?
So we're gonna do it, you're gonna give it back to me later and we'll move on?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll sign.
Okay, sorry. You want to let me know? I'd just like to reiterate, this is because it is a sensitive document, that, you know, you're providing your input and you're not sharing it with multitudes of people. You're not sharing it where this is confidential. Okay. Anything else you need from us?
No,
No, okay. So with regards to that, Trustee Susan, would you like to move for receipt of this? Sure. All right. And there are other trustee comments. Sorry. Trustee Johan. Trustee Johan. Would you like to second that?
Oh, yes, of course. I also want to add this. I have seen this.
Did you have some input at this point?
But I just want to appreciate this is
Okay. Excellent.
very well
Thank you.
written document. So
Thank you.
I'm happy to second it.
Okay. And it really is fabulous work that, you know, we're revamping this with Gaia, being more inclusive and more.
Can I just interrupt? Sorry.
Yes, yeah.
You put three symbols there. One was connections, important points, and what was the third one?
Questions you have, yes. It doesn't have to be that, you can just write
No,
comments.
no, it just, you know,
Just trying to be, you know,
the third one.
Yeah, so as
Thank
you're
you.
going through it, you can write on it.
Three symbols.
And yeah. Okay. All right, so we will move on then. Again, thank you for that work. We'll move on now. To 7.3, which is SESS 5, reporting a child in need of protection, which is kind of linked to this. Yes.
And through you, Chair, it was just most recently approved as an operating procedure prior to my starting in the role, but I thought it was important that you understood that it has too been rewritten. And my Andrea Dewar-Salmon, who is the coordinating principal who wrote this report, was not feeling well today, and she thought it best in the best interest of everybody on the committee if she just stayed home today, so she sends her regrets. So for SESS 5 is reporting a child in need of protection. Next slide, please. And the purpose of the report was to ensure compliance with sections 125 of the Child, Youth and Family Services Act from 2017 with respect of all school staff to report any child that needs protection. And to explain when we were reported concern that a child may be in need of protection of the Children's Aid Society. So this is an obligation that we take very seriously here at the board. Next slide, please. This applies to all Peel District School Board employees and volunteers. So regardless of your role or title, you are obligated to ensure that you understand the parameters of SESS 5, and they have a duty to report of a child who might be in need of protection. Next slide, please. A child is anybody younger than the age of 16 years of age. So we just want everybody to be clear on kind of some of the definitions that are within the document. It does, so if it's a child is 17 or older, we do continue to protect that child, but it's through other support services in the community. And a child protection investigation may be undertaken with a child who is 16 or 17, so maybe the subject of child protection order. allegations of neglect or abuse for young peoples of 16 or 17 can be continue to be shared with Peel Children's Aid, but we also would involve the police as necessary, depending on the allegations. Child protection concern, which means that any person, including a person who performs professional or official duties with respect to children, has reasonable grounds to suspect physical harm, sexual harm, emotional harm, or neglect, that person shall forthright with a report of suspicion and the information on which it's based to the Children's Aid Society. So this is an obligation of all staff. I'm not going to read this all to you, but this is the definition of what would entail physical harm. So it's caused by, failure to adequately care for a person, patterns of neglect in care, or failure to add the risk that the child may be requesting from that person. So anybody who may be harmed, that's what's denoted as physical harm. Sexual harm is if the child has been sexually molested or sexually exploited by the person in charge of that child, or another person where the person having charge of the child knows or should have known that the possibility of sexual molestation could have happened. There's a risk that the child may be sexually molested as described above. And there's a risk that the child may be exploited as a result of being subjected to sex trafficking. Emotional harm is if a child has suffered emotional harm has been demonstrated by serious anxiety, depression, withdrawal, self-destruction or aggressive behaviors, or delayed development. And if there's reasonable grounds of an educator to believe, any field board staff to believe that the emotional harm suffered by the child results from actions or failure of actions to protect that child, then they have to make that phone call. So the operating procedure goes on for really to make it explicit to people who would be making the call, what would be constituting as an emotional harm. And then neglect is the failure to adequately care for and provide for, supervise, or protect a child, or there's a pattern of neglect in caring for, providing for, and supervising the child. That goes on. There's lots of parameters around kind of the reporting mechanism. Next slide. So before reporting a child in need, and this is why we rewrote SESS 5, you have to consider your biases in reporting possible child protection concerns. So what we saw was an over-reporting again of our Black and Indigenous families because of personal biases of the people who were making the report, or misinterpretations of what the reality of the care was being provided for. So we've done extensive training around understanding how our only social location and privilege, if we have it, impacts our decision to really meaningfully and carefully look at and interpret actions of either emotional, physical abuse or neglect. So Peel CAS data has shown that, as we said, there's an over-reporting of Black and Indigenous families, and then we recognize our obligation to disrupt biases and harmful and unnecessary referrals to the Children's Aid Society. That's why we rewrote this operating procedure, to make sure that we were clearly delineating our own role in making sure we were critically conscious about the decisions we were making. So we need to report means that, any suspicion of a child that might need protection, then they have to report by talking to the principal and not delaying a report to Children's Aid Society. So generally what happens is that they talk to their principal or supervisor, depending on where they are, and then they start the report. Then they consult with the school social worker who's recommended when there's grounds to suspect a child may be in need of protection. So we're bringing again in multi kind of disciplinary approach to looking at this through a critical lens, knowing that we want to make sure and affirm our suspicions. And the duty to report cannot be delegated to any other person. So the duty to report falls on the person who received the information. So I can't, if I'm a teacher, I can't say to my principal, I heard this, can you call CAS for me? It has to be a first person report directly from that person. And then they collect background information if the suspicion is based. If there's physical harm involved, CAS may intervene right away. Slide, please. So when a child indicates they have marks on their body from physical force or use of a weapon and they're not visible, PDSB employer volunteer may not request to see the harm. So we're not asking children, show me that, or, show me your leg or show me your arm or any other part. We're not asking that. We're going to believe the voice of the child. It's an ongoing, so we have a further duty to report. If we've heard allegations once and reported and we hear them again, we make a secondary report. So we don't say, oh, we've already reported that, CAS, that there's nothing to report. We make a secondary report each and every time a new allegation is surfaced. And then every effort shall be made to report the situation to Children's Aid as early as possible, knowing that sometimes schools are directed to keep children at school if CAS determines that. So CAS becomes the guiding principle or guiding mind in those situations and says and directs the school with what to do. So this talks about the school's procedure on making sure that it's really clear what our roles and responsibilities are, and making sure that we understand our role. It's not our role to investigate. It's CAS's role to investigate. It's our role to report. Please. And then it talks about CAS investigatory process. So this was built in partnership with CAS, of course, who takes on the investigation, and talks about when a child has to be interviewed, they need a supportive adult to be present to make sure that the child consent is considered, having an adult there. This decision is made jointly between CAS and the principal who knows the child the best. We're always centering the well-being of children. And then he talks about the removal of a child if guided by CAS or the police, and it's responsibility of the Children's Aid Society or police to determine who will notify the parents. Again, not the responsibility of the school, because CAS is the deciding mind in this situation. So it's the responsibility of the CAS or the police to let schools know. Without the consent of a parent, Children's Aid Society is unable to confirm that protection investigation is being initiated or share information about the outcome without parent consent. So we wanted to make sure that we highlighted this aspect as well. PDSB recognizes that particularly vulnerability of children with special education needs and procedures following the report of a child in need of protection will be followed with consideration of additional and appropriate assistance to a child whose disability affects the ability to communicate. So often a child who has reported harm or is seeming to be neglected or something, their needs are being met, we would make sure that we would be able to create conditions so that child was still able to share and that their needs were being met and not ignored as our most vulnerable students. So then the documentation part. So is there any questions? I'm just going to stop there about that process. Happy to answer any questions. And I just want to acknowledge too that I understand and acknowledge that this is challenging to hear, especially as a group of people who care so deeply about students. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Dorothy, I think I'm looking at it through multiple lenses, and I appreciate the information that you're sharing from Caribbean culture. When you speak about Indigenous and Black individuals being unfairly, I'm not going to hold my tongue. Go ahead. So when you're looking at it through the lens of a Black family, and there's overrepresentation going to CAS, I'm trying to understand what processes. I understand that you've written them, but what training is behind viewing it differently, for lack of a better word, because you have the same group of people with the same biases that's supposed to check themselves as to what could be construed incorrectly. So I'm trying to flush that out. What training has been put in place?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, that is an excellent question and in the very nature of why we rewrote the policy. So we did do intensive amount of this training across the board over the last several years around really analyzing our own social locations, what are our implicit biases, why do we think what we think, not just having an initial thought, but interrogating those thoughts, and which is why we added connection to the social worker in to have critical conversations about the process to make sure that we weren't doing exactly that the same people in the decision-making capacity were not reaffirming their beliefs without a level of consciousness. So I will say that as a board, we've gone through an immense amount of training and had both internal and external parties attribute to that around making sure that we were more critically conscious. And I think that Associate Director Stiller would also like to add. Great question.
If I may, Chair, and through you, Chair, a great question. And our previous manager, coordinating principal, Don Addison, had all of our clinical staff for 3 years trained specifically in clinical response with all of our paraprofessionals. So speech and language, psychologists, and social workers were engaged in immense training over the course of the last 3 years on this specific topic.
I understood what you said. I'm still back at square one. So if professionals, not yet, professionals have a duty to report, if they feel strongly enough about that, they could actually circumvent the system, and rightfully so, because they feel strong enough about it, to report what it is that they believe has taken place. And I would respect that. However, taking a step back, having the Black community being over reported for whatever the reasons, there's a lot to be said for that. So again, who's policing the police? If you have a teacher that has that point of view, anybody, if you have a professional that has that point of view, I recognize that you put checks in place, right, to have different lenses to look at the situation. But that doesn't negate the fact that they still have that right to do so, to move forward in that direction. So yes, you've put the guardrails in place. That doesn't mean that somebody can.
Yeah. And through you, Chair, 100%. And I think that's why there's our multiple folks who have been trained. Teachers have been trained, principals have been trained, and social workers have been trained. So we can't, there are going to be mistakes 100%. I'm not going to deny that in any way, shape, or form. CAS is going through its own level of revisioning and retraining and whatnot. And so hopefully, the training is making a difference, much like in this context, but also in just the context of education in the classroom for everyone. It's our hope that we have made a difference, and we will continue to focus and make a difference on some of that learning. And I believe what I've witnessed, and I think what Superintendent Sacato has witnessed over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, that has been a tremendous gain. I can turn to my trustees as well, as they've been engaged in some of this training over the course, a lot of this training, over the course of the last 4 years, and done a lot of learning. But we can't guarantee that we've eliminated any of those false reports or anything like that. We can only hope that the level of training has stuck with some, so that we can potentially filter out some of those missed calls or over-reporting and so on. And then even double check. There's also a level of accountability in the event that we witness an over-reporting at a particular school from a particular staff, from a particular clinician. So there's going to have to be a level of accountability on that front as well.
And through your chair, just to further that, we cannot deny reports. So you're absolutely accurate in that. Like if a staff member wants to make a report, they would make a report. We cannot deny them that, right? Because it falls under what they see as their professional responsibility. But what I will say is that we have not only increased criticality around that, but we've really trained principals to look into as Associate Director Silva said, interrogate practices as well, because if that feeling or belief surfaces in this area, it often surfaces in their over disciplining of children, their their low lack of high standards or achievement for students. So it does show itself in other ways that we will hold them accountable for.
So that's actually being measured then. And people are actually being talked to.
Yes, through you, I would say that we have a significant increase in the amount of disciplinary processes we're having for what we see to be as oppressive practices according to both Policy 48 and the Ontario College of Teachers Standards Practice. Absolutely.
Kevin?
It was, when I look at it, I'm just looking at 4.2 and I think, is there no way that the language can be made a wee bit stronger? Because it says it calls on people to recognize their position of power and authority. That's great, but there's no accountability in there. Like, is there nothing that can be put in there to say that all employees and volunteers have to be trained so that we get ahead of this, so that they don't get into the position where then they're having to navigate that with the principal or whoever? Because, like you say, in the act, it's the person who's involved in it has to do it.
Yeah.
But we need to find a way to stop it before it happens.
Do you want to add on to that?
Jessie?
Yeah, sorry, it just, then I caught myself. I was just gonna say, you hit it bang on, because I heard from parents that were reported on incorrectly because of this bias. There was like a massive emotional, like there was trauma for the child and for the parents and then the community, and that trauma lingers. And you can never measure that trauma on that child, right? But I can tell you for sure that that went on for so long. And there were so many conversations and they ended up going to counseling. And so one call or that bias that they couldn't clear themselves out of ended up being, it ended up just, not destroying, but like creating so much trauma for that child. And it's just a comment. It's not a question that I hear you, like if there's a way to get in front of it, as opposed to like opening on this permanent record, you know, it sounds so permanent and so scary, especially if it's not accurate.
And I would also add that not only are we looking to circumvent the over-reporting of events that aren't happening, that sometimes when our bias causes us to focus on one thing, it causes us not to look elsewhere where something might be happening. So there may be underreporting of neglect and yeah.
And through you, I think that this, as always, this committee has hit all the tensions of that reporting mechanisms, right? So I will say that we continue to be steadfast, even as we go through and complete the objectives of the ministry review. Our director has made it exceedingly clear that we will not stop working on equity and the meaningful inclusion of all students and families. So despite the fact that that is finished, our commitment has not changed, and we will continue to interrogate and train and question and be critical in our approach and open ourselves to feedback from community and feedback that not just is to hear, but to change practice.
Mary, you had something to add?
Through your chair. My thoughts are exactly as Dorothy said. Before she said it, I wrote down who's policing the police. I say that because the fact that we actually have to do investigations to see if there is bias, that's a problem in itself.
Yes.
Because those of us that are experiencing it, we know there is, right? So, I mean, if somebody's on the committee saying we're going to do a report to see if, then we have the wrong people at the table to begin with. Curiosity, do we have a diverse group of people sitting at this table? Should I pick the right words? Sure. And minority is not one of the words that I'm looking for. That needs to be obliterated from our dialogue at this table. So are there Black people, Indigenous people sitting at the table who can speak firsthand to the biases that are going on, because in order to know that the biases have been eliminated, I mean, it's not gonna be, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be racist, it's not gonna be the white folks sitting at the table saying, okay, we're good now. Because like the gentleman was saying, unless you, like, if you don't have a child with disabilities, you really don't understand, how that is and how it affects the child. So, I mean, I know previous, like, that we did, like, the We Rise, and different initiatives to help Black male students, which is very, very disappointing, because the Black male social workers that were in the board, and I do know them, they were not invited to be on this board to help the Black male students. So it's kind of crazy. So I'm just wondering, what is the makeup of the committee that is trying to correct this wrong?
So through you, I will say that Dawn Addison, who was the former coordinating principal who wrote this operating procedures, did follow an extensive collaborative process. I would have to, she's retired now, but I would have to check back with her around her consultation process. So similar to what I'm doing right now with SESS 17, governance, legal and governance ensures that we include stakeholders. So I'd have to bring back her collaborative process. Now, as far as you say there's a committee, there is no committee. Once a report is made to an educator or any PDFSB staff, the process is that they go and talk to their principal, and we bring in the social worker. And then, if they feel like it meets the criteria of those 4 outlines that I shared with you, they would make the call on that day. So there's no committee that talks about kind of should you make the call or not make the call. It's very different that way. It's not done by a committee. It's done, by having this training for people to really be critically conscious. And I would agree with all of you that it doesn't stop the unnecessary calls from happening or missing calls from happening from bias, but it was strongly, taught, learned, and instructed through the social workers who were being called to support these decisions. So I can ask and come back to you, Mary, if you'd like, around the consultation process and who was included in that.
Oh, thank you very much. I'll have a lot more to add.
Sure.
Thank you.
And Trustee Benjamin, you're next, and then we'll move back to Dorothy.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I was just, I want to thank Superintendent Spicotto for the report. And I also want to thank you for bringing up the ministry directives, because as you all know, we were under supervision and the ministry directives were given to us. And the trustees also have undergone very intensive training and all kinds of information being provided to us. And I would also like to acknowledge the fact that the senior administration director, if you go to the board website, you'll find that there's a lot of improvements that have taken place regarding policies. A lot of changes have taken place. And, we are all in the process of implementing the directives. It cannot happen overnight. It's going to take time. That's what I want to say. But I have a question. When we talk about all these trainings that are given to the principals, teachers, etc., are the new teachers also included? So is it also part of the new teacher induction program? Because that is very, very important for our young and teachers coming from other boards. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question. It's for you, Chair. Mandatory reporting is mandatory training for every educator and every employee every year. So it's yearly training that's done as a part of our due diligence training. This year was done on October 6th across every school. And part of the learning would have been around that criticality and making sure that we are making more critically informed decisions. So it is mandatory training again, that is done every year as a part of our requirements.
I'm going to have Dorothy in the back again.
Thank you for that. You actually answered the first one.
Oh, perfect.
That it's mandated. I'm unsure how this would actually play out. If you have an individual who feels strongly enough about their thought process and goes directly to CAS to report, is there any, do you capture that in any reporting afterwards? Meaning that after the fact that the person has do you have a mechanism in which to get that information, extract that information, better word, from that individual that, yes, you took these steps, and right or wrong is now captured in some reporting that you have. And I guess on the flip side of the coin, it may curtail anybody from actually moving forward in that direction because there is some accountability, a mechanism that's there's oversight.
Yeah.
Through your chair, and I think it's a delicate matter, as you can understand, right? So I've been here for 30 years, and unfortunately, I've had some really catastrophic situations where children were in need of protection for neglect and for whatever reason. So it's a very delicate balance around when do we report and when do we not report. It's not an easy task, and I will say it's agonizing for most teachers to make a call. For that very reason, for they know the impact that it would have potentially on the student and family, even if they believe that the situation requires a phone call, they still have this agonizing feeling. And so how it really unfolds is that the teacher potentially would witness something, see something, hear something, and they would reach out to the administrator. And although the legislation says that the individual makes the call, how it unfolds is they're making the call in conjunction, typically, I would say 99.9% of the time, with the administrator present and with consultation. So that's kind of how it unfolds. And so there are, if you will, some conversations and checks and balances and those kinds of things that transpire. And to your first question around where that is, it is logged. They have to write the report, they make the form. We've made some changes, and I'll turn it over to Kwame.
Yeah, we can show you that slide of what the documentation looks like, how they document and that we collect it. So there is exactly what you're saying, checks and balances to ensure that centrally we're collecting all the documentation as well. If we want to put the slide deck up and go back to the reporting form. Sorry, Mark, thanks. So, sorry, you can go to the next one. Yep. Keep going. So this is something too that we should have said, like if they have failed to report, they can actually be charged. Educators can be charged to lose their licenses if they know that there's neglect or abuse happening and they do not report it. So to Associate Director Silva's point, teachers and educators and staff take this responsibility very seriously. I think I included in here what the actual document looks like. If you want to just keep going. It's confidential and privileged, and then there's no action can be taken against a PDSB for making a report, even if it's not grounded, but unless the PDSB employee or volunteer acts maliciously or without reasonable grounds. So there is protection in there to say this was a malicious report, or there was not reasonable grounds to make this report. And that would be a conversation that CAS would have back with the chief social worker here at the board, saying that this was a malicious report. There wasn't grounds for that. Keep going if you, there's, I think the chart's in here. Is there any more, Mark, slides? Keep going. It was a long, this was a school-based presentation. So, oh, sorry, go back one thing. One more, just one more. Yeah, so the managers of social work really make sure that they have all the relevant training, and they're the ones, as I said, who collect all of the Form As and reach out to the reporter for a conversation about the concerns and whether it meets one's duty to report. So that's that checks and balances that all of you were talking about to make sure that that our managers of social work are doing that appropriately. And then then the last slide is what the reporting tool actually is. Did I put a link in there or did I forget?
Legally.
Oh, there is a report. Thank you. I thought I put it in. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, sure.
A failed report for volunteers can also be charged?
Yes, through you, Chair. Yes, volunteers are also obligated, and when volunteers, part of the volunteer agreement is that you are notified that if you hear of that, an incident where a child might need protection, that you are obligated to make phone calls as well.
So I would argue that we are volunteers, so as parent reps, if we hear something, we also have a legal obligation to report. Kevin?
It was a question on the, related to that, for volunteers, lunchroom supervisors, emergency instructors that aren't teaching, do they receive that mandatory training?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Howard, any other?
And
Dorothy?
then, sorry, just following up, and there's a timeline in respect to all of this, correct? So the social worker, the teacher, for lack of a better word, or let's use it, pick out the teacher. Teacher sees something, hears something, whatever, brings that to the administrator. The administrator then contacts the social worker, everybody gets together, goes through the checklist, and then contacts CAS.
Yes, and sometimes the social worker is not available, but depending on that, so that's a great question. Generally, principals would expedite the conversation between teachers by providing coverage for their classroom, because we want to always make sure it's a timely response. Reach out teams has been a benefit to that, because it's easier to get a hold of people, so we're seeing more and more consultation in that regard. But principals, in the absence of being able to connect with a social worker, would need to use their best judgment to make sure that the reporting is necessary if that's not available. But we have now 3 managers of social work, and we have a number of social workers across the unit that are helping schools. So we have a plethora of staff in that regard.
Anything else? Larry?
Through you, Chair. I know there's a lot to this, but I heard you say teachers, principals, social workers, CAS. Where does the parent come in? At what point do we notify the parent before we go to CAS?
So we are not allowed to notify. That's a great question. Thank you through you, Chair. Often, sometimes it's involving parents and sometimes not. The responsibility for communication with families is either through CAS or the police. That's their responsibility to notify families. So if the school does not notify families generally, that's done through CAS as a part of the protocol.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Nicole, would you like to move for receipt of that? Josie, would you like to second it? Thank you. That was quite intense. We appreciate that, efforts are being made to keep our children safe, and policies are continually being rewritten and looked at with a new lens, a lens of equity and inclusion. So, thank you. Number 8, we have no communications. I don't have any, for 9, I don't have any written questions from committee members, and so we will move to 10. Does anybody have a report with regards to their organization? No events coming up. Okay. Questions asked of and by committee members. Okay, so we will ask, this is your opportunity to ask questions. Any outstanding questions? Barb?
Yes, we had asked for the slides that Janet presented to us last month, if they could be distributed to us, and I haven't seen them. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll make sure those are sent out.
One of the questions that came up just when I was chatting with Jamie was around whether BCBAs do any kind of work with the teachers in the preparation of the IEP process. And I didn't know that. Do we have a in the various schools when the IEP is created, are the BCBAs part of that?
Through you, Chair, I'll ask coordinating principal Erla Jacket to answer that question.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So BCBA's role is to look at interfering behaviors right? And it's to look at the behaviors and then look at ways to reduce or minimize those behaviors. So BCBAs would be working on, it's not really considered part of the IEP. At one time it was an extra page, but it's called the PBIT, the Positive Behavior Intervention Plan. And so that's what they are working with teachers and schools to develop. Thanks.
Mary, you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question to you, Chair. So school, when I think of school, I think of academics, teaching our kids, you know, the ABCs, 1, 2, 3, that type of thing. But the more I sit at this table, it seems like it's moving away from that a lot. A lot of what we talk about is like safety and different things like that. I know I've asked in previous meetings about teachers being mandated to like upgrade their skills and things like that. Like, are they not mandated to learn the technology, especially before COVID, where everybody didn't have to learn the technology? And the response that I received at this table is we can't mandate that. Like, we can strongly advise, we can do whatever we can to kind of, you know, let them know we would like them to, but we can't mandate. But then I sit here today and the duty to report, it's mandatory. Like, it's mandatory that they attend this. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around, why wouldn't it be important or mandated that teachers be current in how they teach our students? That's kind of optional. But then in order to, of course, if a child is being abused, it needs to be recorded. But I just can't wrap my head around that. Like, why wouldn't that also be a mandatory thing? Like, is that something that we can get mandatory? You know, like, this is the lives of our students. They need to be adequately educated, right? Yeah, so, sorry.
Yeah, and through you, Chair, I couldn't agree more. We are an educational institution that provides supports and removes barriers to access for students with disabilities. So I could not agree with you more. Part of the OCT standards of practice requires that all teachers stay current in their practice. So it is mandatory, Mary, that teachers stay current in their practice. The way that that's monitored and assessed is through multiple means, right? Teachers, principals would have the ability to do both formal evaluations to determine the level of progress that teachers have made in their instructional and assessment, of students in the class through a formal teacher approval, TPA they're called, teacher performance appraisal. And then there's other ways of having what we call walkthrough conversations. So when principals are walking through classrooms, are they seeing the use of technology? Are they seeing differentiated instruction or the use of universal design for learning? Are they seeing elements of culturally responsive pedagogy? And then they have what's called learning conversations. So we are moving forward as a board through the support of our director and our director's office on really refocusing on early literacy and numeracy. You'll see that through our board goals that there is a renewal of those tenets of making sure that students have literacy and numeracy goals in alignment with the board plan. And you will see that as a department, we are partnering with the school improvement team to make sure that that the supports that are being put in place are considerate of all types of learners. So that it's not just for neurotypical learners that they're putting these supports in place, but that we also have a voice at that table. And that's called SEAC, which is a school improvement and equity planning. So I couldn't agree with you more in hoping that families are starting to see the resurgence of early literacy. As I shared in my early report, the board put out a new the ministry put out a new language curriculum, which includes the direct instructions of phonics instruction for 30 minutes a day in the K to 3. So our board has come on board, and we've already trained at the special education student what that looks like from tier 1, 2, and 3 support for our learners. So I'm hoping that you start to see a difference in that focus.
Thank you. And then just one other point. My original question at the beginning about the graduation rates for Block 1, I did receive an email during the meeting, which I quickly looked over. I don't see anything about that in there. So if we could, I don't know if it's in there. I was listening to the meeting as well and briefly going through it. I did not see anything about students graduating in year 7, Gulf 1, or anything.
Right, so I think, thank you, and through you, Chair, thanks for the question there. I think with respect, if you are asking staff, particularly our research department, to desegregate data, I think that'll have to be a motion on the floor to potentially move that to our research department to set aside time and space to do that. I'm not sure whether that will be accepted or not in terms of desegregating that data. And oftentimes that, as I said, the previous time, sometimes that data is so scaled to a minimum that we often can identify students or certain grades and so on. So we would have to run that by our research department to see what can be done with respect to that, or if it's something that you may want to have included in our next accountability report card or grad rate data as they engage in kind of reviewing that kind of information.
So would this be an opportunity to be have that included in number 12, community member motions for consideration? Make a motion and have it considered that we bring back these numbers?
If you're asking me through you, Chair, I think that's potentially something that's doable. I would.
Number 13, okay, so
And I think what's important, however, is potentially maybe that you sidebar and think about what that motion is going to look like and sound like.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Because we're just here thinking about all sorts of things. So I think it's important that we just spend a little time to kind of gather our thoughts, Mary, and maybe get together with a few folks and kind of formulate what that motion can look like, and we could probably present it, bring it forward in the next meeting.
I think that's a great idea. I think a number of us would be interested in finding the numbers if it's feasible. Yeah. Anything else, Mary?
Yeah, I'm listening to this. I kind of want to put it as like, we need to have the information. It's not like we would like to request the information. It has, I mean, we have data on all kinds of things. I mean, I could run them off for you. Special needs has been here forever, and this is what we do. So I don't see how we don't have that information. Yeah, I would strongly like to say that we need to see those numbers. Because if we don't have those numbers, we cannot account for what is happening with our students. And the fact that the number, like it said something about the number too small to whatever, that means they're insignificant? Like our students are insignificant? No, but I understand that, but we still have to account for those.
But what it means is that we can identify, be able to identify the students that we can't identify the students.
No, I don't mean specific students.
But it's like the number of students that are attending block 1 is so small. There, you could triangulate the data to identify students, but not directly, you know what I mean? Like that is name wouldn't, that students.
No, I don't want
we don't want the name, but.
No, just the data on our block 1.
We can.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't know, I'm not looking for people's names.
We'll wait for motion. Yes, the numbers.
Thank you very much.
All right. Oh, now we and Dorothy. Okay, Kevin, you're.
I wanted to come back to the UDL comment, the Universal Design for Learning. I can't find anything on the board in terms of what the board does on UDL, and it's such an important thing that if we had that implemented, we probably wouldn't need to be sitting here, and it needs to be front and center so that all teachers adopt that. And I know teachers don't know how to use Sunday assistive technology. I see it every day, and they aren't trained in how to support these students. So we need to do, we need to see the data that goes with this to say, okay, well, what is the graduation rate for our students with IEPs? The IEPs are on a system, right? Which means we can query that system to get a number. in 30 seconds. Like stuff we can do that's easy to get a lot of this information that would be really, really helpful for us.
And through you, we do a lot of work through our Empowering Modern Learners team and the Modern Learning Resource teachers around UDL. Understanding that it is a very significant instructional model that allows for students how they learn and their learning style to be centered in the decisions, instructional and assessment decision makings. I'm not sure what you see outward facing, but in our internal facing document, there is a lot of support around UDL. But if that's something of interest to SEAC, I can see if our EML team can come and present around UDL and create a report for you if that's of interest.
Great, because I mean, a lot of the other boards, it's there. You can look at the UDL policies and some of the practices. It's not here.
I guess I'm remiss in that we have had a presentation about UDL, but I know that was a number of years ago. So yeah, maybe it would be good to have a new presentation. Thank you, Kevin, for bringing that up. Dorothy, you're next.
It's just a continuation of the same flow. Same thought process. In respect to what Mary was saying, in respect to what Kevin was saying. If you have teachers who are adverse, who have some, what's the word? Some teachers who simply aren't they're technologically challenged. And you are asking them to learn new things, adapt new processes, put new programming in play for a little person, and that's not their thing, for lack of a better word. How do you hold them accountable, right? And yes, you may have the principal go by and take a snapshot picture of that specific moment in time to formulate whatever decision-making he or she can gather in that moment, but how do you hold their feet to the fire? Because I have had experiences, I've had parents speak to me, personal experiences, where we at SEAC talk of a plethora of different softwares that's put in place, and you walk out, you're energized. Yes, this is awesome. Can't wait to see it implemented. You go and speak with a teacher, you speak with a TA, and they're oblivious to what, like you're speaking another language. They're oblivious to what it is you're talking about. And months later, you follow up and you think, well, clearly it's got to trickle down. Nothing. It's either it's there and that's not their thing, or it's just taken that long for it to filter down, because you're operating at a very high level, right? Boots on the ground looks very different. So I'm hearing what Mary says. We've walked the walk, we've been in the trenches, we get it. You can't force a teacher, or I guess a different spin on it is, how do you force the teacher to learn the technology and utilize the technology with the child?
Yeah, and through you're absolutely right. We can't force a teacher to use instructional programming that they don't want to, unfortunately. They're meeting the child's learning needs other ways. But I would say that continued advocacy from parent groups is a great way. We, as I said, have assistive technology resource teachers across the board that really align with, of course, SEAC claims for student equipment that do go out and train students and staff on how to use these. If it's a situation where it's a SEAC kind of, we would like to know about that as a department. If the SEAC technology that is aligned with student because of their individual education needs is not being used, that's a violation of their IEP, and that's something that we would need to have. If this is general class learning, I will continue to take that back and share with my colleague who is in charge of empowering modern learners and how we can continue to provide learning and training for staff to increase the level of usage in the classroom, because I am the former coordinating principal of empowering modern learners, so have a steadfast dedication to including technology, especially for increasing the equity of access. So I would agree with you, and I'll take that back to my colleague. But also if it's an individual student ATRT question, I would really want to know if that student was not being able to access that learning.
One more
question.
And sorry, and then, so Trustee Benjamin had her question first, and then, I'm sorry, Kevin, we'll move back to you after we get Trustee Benjamin, because we need to honor the fact.
Okay, this is not a question. This is just to, the discussion which was going on. I'm going to give you my own personal experience. I've been a teacher with the PDSB, came here 20 years ago from India, where I just was a lecturer, didn't use any technology. I came here and I had to use it. But because of all the training that was provided to me, and the fact that every 5 years, is it 5 years, a TPA, you're being evaluated, and we had staff who helped you. And I must say, I'm not a technologically proficient person, but we had the supports. And there were certain expectations which we had to fulfill. So I retired in 2016. And when I think about the changes that have taken place, the progress that has been made in all areas, whether it's technology or whatever, it's incomparable. And I don't think I would have survived, considering my, age and experience and the fact that. So I would like to just assure you that there are all supports in place for our staff. And there are expectations with they're supposed to be fulfilling to be a good teacher. And every teacher who comes into this profession does because they have that desire to be a teacher and to interact with kids. This is just my own personal experience. And can I ask my question? So we were talking about a lot of things here, and I'm just referring to 7.3, that is reporting a child in need of protection. And we have spoken about so many ways in which our kids are being challenged, whether it's social, emotional, mental, abuse, whether it's physical, whether it's violence, and all kinds of things. And I just want to ask a question, because there is a documentary which was being shown last week in the board for parents, and that is called Vulnerable Innocence: The Internet, Our Children in Charge. This was based on human sex trafficking. So my question is, as members of the SEAC advisory group, which represents a lot of community organizations, does the board inform them that, there are these things being shown? And it was, I was really shocked, because I did take the time to go and watch this. It was meant for PDSB staff, for parents. Unfortunately, the number of parents who attended was very limited, but I was told that a lot of publicity was given to it through, Sinner Voice and all the other methods used to inform parents. But I don't know, I went for one showing, and there were 3 others in 3 different schools, and I don't know, but I just want to inform and to acknowledge that this is something which should be seen by all parents, because the harm that can be caused to young kids if they are given unsupervised use of the internet. And so I just wanted to know if it's just a question whether our member, organizations, are they being informed about this? Because this is.
And through you, Chair, that was work that was done, Superintendent Stunning said in the
Yes,
during schools. We did not inform SEAC of that. We do inform through our public social media, our kind of all families information. If that's something, we can talk to SEAC about how they're receiving communication around kind of parent evenings. And to that end, I wanted to answer back to Mary's question from last week around how she can share community events. And I have talked to Tiffany Gooch at the communications, who's our communications lead. And she said she'd be happy to share all information coming from SEAC through, I think she called it the community corner, but I don't want to promise the name. I think that's what it's called. But so if information needs to be shared, you can share it through SEAC, and we'll put that up.
All right, one last question is,
It was, sorry, it was an example on the technology side, which is you use a piece of software called Orbit Note, which is really good. However, there was a glitch in it. So we asked about it. The word comes back, well, you have to do it this way. And I thought that doesn't make any sense. So I asked Orbit Note Text Help, the company that write it, and they gave me a different answer. So then I have to go back to the board and say you're wrong. And that should not, like it's a simple thing or maybe, but it can cause problems with the learning, right? Because if the documents aren't uploaded correctly, it doesn't work. But nobody seemed to be able to, answer that. So I had to go and find out the answer myself. Which easy to rectify.
And three, you don't have an answer to that question.
No, I know. But it's an example where that, we have all this awesome technology, but if it's not, if it's not correctly implemented or taught, it's not going to work.
All right. Okay, so, the motion action log is. Sorry, we're skipping through because we're gonna use these, I think we are gonna use 12 and 13 at some point. Getting excited. 14, the motion and action log, do we have any?
Yes, through you, I'd like to close that motion action log by providing the following information. So we took the K-12 education standards. The board currently created a multi-year accessibility plan. We shared the final recommendations with abilities, and they're going to be reviewing and considering the implementation moving forward. And we will also review as a special education department those recommendations. I happen to be the chair of the multi-year accessibility plan, so I am taking that forward.
And did you communicate this with with Jennifer Knight, since she's not here? With the representative?
No, through you, Chair, I thought she would be here tonight, so we're sharing that as an motion action log, but if you'd like me to email her to make sure she understands that we've taken that up.
I would appreciate that.
Not a problem.
Thank you. All right. It is 8:55, and it's time for the lovely attendant who would like to move for adjournment. Dorothy, seconder. Helen, all in favor, and we are adjourned.